Don't talk to me, I'm tired. Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. Wait. I tried to call out, but no voice came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I've been putting up with him for so long now. Maybe it's partly my fault. Maybe Christopher is just busy with work, I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I resorted to the last option. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. I decided to get a divorce once and for all. It was then that I noticed a new message on Christopher's mobile phone on the table. I was shocked when I saw it without thinking. What the? Seeing that, I vowed to myself. I had no choice but to brace myself. I'm going to show that man. I am Zoe, 26 years old. I recently married Christopher after dating him for about 3 years and moved out of my home. It's odd to say it myself, but being the youngest, I was doted on. So, on the day I left, my whole family cried. Be happy, Zoe. Christopher, please take care of Zoe. Of course, sir. Despite Dad's statement that seemed to pressure, Christopher answered with a relaxed smile. I'm really counting on you. There are 2 reasons why Dad emphasized this so much. The first reason is that Christopher has a history of divorce. Moreover, he ended his first marriage in just 6 months. The reason for the divorce was supposedly due to personality differences, but the brevity of the marriage was concerning. Dad had consented to the marriage, but had always been worried about that. I understand your feelings all too well as a man. So, today, I thought I'd make a clear statement. Christopher declared loudly and pulled out something he had brought. It was, astonishingly, a filled-out divorce application form. Though it may seem an aberrant act by common standards, Christopher said earnestly and handed something to Dad. If I can't make Zoe happy, please submit this. Continuing, Christopher added to the bewildered Dad. I apologize for causing worry to you all because of my divorce history. So, this is like an insurance. I won't need to use this. I'm determined to make her happy. Please accept it. Dad was perplexed, but took Christopher's earnestness to heart. He silently nodded and accepted it. This was the second reason for Dad's worry. Christopher was quite the charmer and an eccentric man. Understood. I'll trust you. Dad nodded with a complicated expression. Our married life began like this. Not to say it was a dream come true, but I was looking forward to our marriage. However, what awaited me, full of anticipation, was an unexpected hell. After quitting my job and becoming a housewife, I woke up earlier than Christopher every day, prepared everything, and saw him off with a smile. Have a good day. Do your best. Before we were married, Christopher would respond with a hug and a kiss. I'm off. I'll do my best for you. He would always sew and leave the house, waving his hand. But after marriage, Christopher changed. Yeah. With just that single word, Christopher would leave the house. His aloofness was so surprising that at first, I wondered if he was feeling unwell. Furthermore, when he returned home, Christopher was strange. Welcome home. Would you like dinner? Or would you like to take a bath? I greeted him with the usual line. To that, Christopher languidly replied, Bath. Just bath? Is something wrong? Confused, I couldn't help but ask, but Christopher just looked at me coldly for a moment and replied, Nothing. Thinking back, maybe getting any response was better than nothing. Now, a week into our marriage, Christopher has stopped responding altogether. When he's in a good mood, he might still react with a word or a gesture, but the problem is when he is in a bad mood. When Christopher is in a bad mood, he completely ignores me. Hey, don't ignore me. You've been like this ever since we got married. Did I do something wrong? Christopher didn't reply. Please say something. When I started to feel down and tears were about to fall, Christopher sighed heavily upon seeing this. You think crying solves everything, don't you? Must be nice being a woman, it's so easy. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't stop the tears. I silently looked down, the only thing I could do was hide my tears. Actually, my dad runs a company. I am what you would call a president's daughter. Before getting married, I worked as an office clerk at my dad's company. That's where I met Christopher. I, an office clerk, often handled the sales slips of Christopher, who was in sales. We gradually became close, and he asked me out. He seemed very surprised to learn I was the president's daughter, but that made me happy. He saw me not as the president's daughter, but for who I am personally. Back then, Christopher who would earnestly listen to my stories and respond with a smile. But that Christopher is long gone now. I wish I hadn't married him. Is there some reason for this? Did I do something wrong? I thought about it, but couldn't find any reason. The only thing that seemed to have caused Christopher to change so drastically was the marriage itself. Getting married, some people change due to relaxation or familiarity. I think that happens to some extent. But in Christopher's case, it was more than just to some extent. If I had known he was like this before marriage, I would never have married him. I took out a sheet of paper from a file I had kept in my desk. It was the divorce application form that Christopher had given me that day. If I submit this to the city hall, would the old Christopher come back? I spent days looking at the divorce application form and then putting it back. One day, when I returned from shopping, Christopher was standing in the doorway with a scary look on his face, waiting for me. It was the middle of a weekday. Why was he at home? Wondering, I tried to smile and spoke. Welcome home. Christopher slammed the table. Startled by the noise, I stumbled and fell. Christopher took a few steps closer, looked down at me coldly, and showed me the paper he was holding. Do you know what this is? In fear, I nodded. What Christopher held was the filled-out divorce application form. It was supposed to be always in the drawer, but why? Then I realized. Maybe I had looked at it before shopping, as usual, and forgot to put it back. Do you want to divorce me? Well, I couldn't say it wasn't true. Life with Christopher recently has been mentally exhausting. If this kind of life continues, I am considering divorce. It's because you've been strange since we got married. Lately, you ignore everything I say, and I can't call this happiness. So it's my fault. Then he stared at the divorce application form. I'm fine with divorcing. What? But remember, in this case, Zoe, you're the one at fault. The problem lies with you, failing to support your husband as a wife. Christopher waved the divorce application form. But Christopher, you said to Dad. He promised he would make me happy. Before I could finish, Christopher seemed to realize something and snorted. Promise to make you happy, huh? A typical princess way of thinking. How could you? You and your family are too naive. Clearly, our worlds are too different. It might be good for you to experience poverty for once. I didn't understand what Christopher meant, but from that day on, he stopped giving me any living expenses. Moreover, he even took away my credit card and debit cards. Originally, I quit my job because Christopher wanted me to. I want you to greet me cheerfully when I come home, Christopher said, and I became a housewife to fulfill his request. Now, as a housewife, I have no income. It seems Christopher was paying for the rent and utility bills, but the biggest problem was food. The food at home is almost gone. Please, I need living expenses. Although it was humiliating, I begged Christopher. Christopher seemed pleased and said something outrageous. Don't worry. I'll eat out. What? Wait a minute. No matter how much I pleaded, he completely ignored me, and I ended up not getting any living expenses. Christopher continued to come home late night after night. I managed to survive on the remaining food and instant meals, but I had reached my limit. On a rare day when Christopher came home on time, I finally voiced the thoughts that had been haunting me. You don't give me any money, and you don't talk to me. This isn't happiness, this isn't even a marriage. If this life continues, if you don't intend to change, please, let's get a divorce. I hoped that this might make Christopher change, even a little. If he didn't change at all, then I would give up. It was my last resort. I waited anxiously for Christopher's response. Christopher looked down and scratched his head, then spoke in a low voice. "Don't talk to me, I'm tired." Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. Wait. I tried to call out, but no sound came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I had endured so much. Christopher had changed his attitude completely after marriage, and I wondered if it was partly my fault. Maybe it's because he's busy with work. I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I had to take the final step. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. There was no sign of disturbance on Christopher's face. Normally, wouldn't someone panic a little if their spouse they loved asked for a divorce? Instead, Christopher looked terribly bothered. Seeing that face made it clear. Christopher no longer loved me. Let's get a divorce, once and for all. There's no point in continuing this marriage. I'm hungry, and I might as well pack my bags right now. I slowly stood up and headed towards the drawer where the divorce application form was kept. Then, I noticed the screen of Christopher's mobile phone on the table lighting up. It seemed like a message had arrived. I intended just to glance at it, but what I saw shocked me. What the? Displayed on the mobile phone was a screen full of heart emojis. I impulsively picked up the mobile phone to check the message. Thank you for yesterday. Let's spend another night together soon. The sender of the message was someone named Lily. I tried to remember, but I had no recollection of anyone named Lily. I checked towards the changing room. There was still no sign of Christopher coming up. Looking back at the mobile phone, it was carelessly left unlocked. I sighed. The more I looked, the more evidence of infidelity I found. The message exchanges alone confirmed the intimacy with Lily, but there were even pictures of them snuggling close together. Leaving such conclusive evidence without even locking the phone, how careless could one be? Or did he think it was okay to be found? I'm being underestimated. I became oddly calm. I recorded the mobile phone screen with my phone, keeping evidence of everything that might be relevant. After finishing, I placed the mobile phone back on the table, and Christopher came out of the bath. Without saying a word, and without any follow-up to earlier, Christopher retreated to his room. It was simple. Christopher was cheating. That's why he had been so distant. In my sorrow, I understood. From the next day, I started working towards divorcing Christopher. There was no more hesitation or confusion. All that was left was anger at being betrayed. First, I needed to find out who Lily was. Hiring a professional would be more reliable, so I decided to hire a detective. At the same time, I started my own investigation. Christopher's recent late work hours and weekend work seemed suspicious if he was cheating. I could quickly verify the facts with Dad's help. Though it pained me to worry him, there was no other choice. I needed to do what needed to be done. I'll show him hell. The hardest part during the divorce preparations was having to see Christopher's face even in such times. The face I once found dear now only brought up the desire to slap him. Maybe my disdain showed. You're looking uglier than usual. Are you sick or something? Christopher initiated a conversation. Couldn't he have found something nicer to say? I answered with a smile. I'm fine. Once the preparations were done, there would be no need to stay here any longer. Taking advantage of the weekend when Christopher went to work as usual, I decided to take action. I told everything to Dad, who was furious and immediately arranged a place for me to move. I had initially thought of returning to my parents' house, but my sister had just returned there for her childbirth. Considering the circumstances, staying at my parents' house was not an option. So, Dad arranged a mansion worth $1 million. It belonged to a relative who was about to put it up for sale. They weren't in a hurry to sell, so they let me stay there. Dad also gave me enough money for my immediate needs, so my life was back to normal. In fact, it became more comfortable. "Where the hell are you now?" The call from Christopher, full of surprise, came 3 days after I left the house. "Who knows?" So I replied, and Christopher's voice grew tense. "And the divorce papers are missing, don't tell me you." This surprised me too. He noticed the missing divorce papers quite quickly. Did he start searching frantically after realizing I was gone? This was the first time I've seen Christopher so flustered. Even through the phone, I could picture his panic, which made me laugh a little. "What about it?" "I've submitted them to the office." When I answered calmly, Christopher made a strange noise. "What? Why?" "You said, remember? If you can't make me happy, I should submit them. You even declared it with a smug face." "That was just to reassure Zoe's parents." So he was panicking because I actually submitted the divorce papers, which he intended only as a performance? "And I told you before. If this kind of life continues, I want a divorce." That time I was just tired. "I talked to Dad, and he said your department isn't that busy." I cut off Christopher's attempt to blame his fatigue. He always claimed to be busy, returning home late and frequently worked on weekends. I never doubted him, just worried. But I should have questioned it. Was Christopher really going to work, or should I have investigated? "I found it odd, you know? I asked Dad when I saw him yesterday. He was puzzled too. Overtime is one thing, but weekend work should only happen a few times a year, so he was also wondering why." "No, well... Hey, you weren't working, were you? What were you so busy with every week? Where were you going?" Christopher didn't respond. I knew it. He couldn't answer. In his mind, Christopher was probably scrambling for an excuse. He's smart and smooth-talking. But this time, nothing he said would matter. Because I already knew everything. Lily, right? She's quite the cutie. I could tell Christopher gasped over the phone. "How did you?" Detectives are quite efficient. They secured photos and videos as evidence right away. I looked over the photos and report in my hand, reading aloud. Lily. A 22-year-old office worker in the accounting department. Oh, more than a decade younger than you. I'm 8 years younger too. Christopher seems to like younger women. Lives in an apartment near the downtown area, 2nd floor. Wow, so you've been visiting her every week. Zoe, wait, Lily is... Christopher is quite the needy one. He used to cling to me a lot before we got married. Seeing Christopher, 8 years older, acting so needy made me happy back then, but now the mere thought disgusts me. By the way, conversations with Lily are also safely recorded as evidence. Wait until I divorce my wife. What a classic line from a married man. Couldn't you come up with something better? The detective also suggested that Christopher looked down on me quite a bit. Your wife will find out, you know. It doesn't matter, she's on her way down anyway. That's what he said. I was utterly underestimated. Wait, Zoe. You're misunderstanding something. Can we meet just once? I suppose. I was thinking we should meet one last time. The next night, we agreed to meet, with Lily accompanying him. The venue was the mansion I was renting. When Christopher arrived at the designated time, he seemed uneasy. What's with this mansion? It's a place I'm renting. It's worth $1 million. $1 million? Christopher's voice cracked, and Dad watched him intently. So, your dad is here too? Christopher's eyes darted nervously. Well, yes. It's only fair since you brought Lily. Plus, this affair involves company employees. It's best to have Dad here, as he's the company's head. I suppose you're right. Christopher said with a forced smile. Dad glared at Christopher the entire time. Lily, with her bright hair and petite frame, looked cute, but had a surprisingly strong personality. As soon as the discussion began, glaring at me, and she opened her mouth. I'm a victim too. I had no idea Christopher was married. And now, I'm dragged here, it's unpleasant. Lily's assertiveness surprised me. But Christopher looked even more shocked. What? You were the one pushing me to leave my wife. That was just a joke. Christopher turned red with anger at Lily's evasion. Why did I even bother to have a relationship with such a woman? I could hear him mutter. Lily snapped back, and they started arguing right in front of us. To think I'd be serious about an old man like you. Excuse me? Who do you think caused all this? You said our company was doomed. That's why I decided to end it with Zoe. Wait, what? Apparently, right after we got married, Lily had whispered to Christopher. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. As a husband, you'll end up suffering too. Initially, Christopher didn't take her seriously, but Lily was persuasive, and he began to believe her. Seeing me act considerately towards him, he concluded the company must indeed be in trouble. I thought you were sweet-talking me to saddle me with debts. What? I thought you were just tired. I found it odd that everyone was being overly kind to me. Perhaps his boss and co-workers were being cautious because he married the president's daughter. But the idea that Dad's company was in crisis was a complete misunderstanding. Dad, being present during this conversation, also confirmed. Thanks to everyone, we're actually thriving. There's absolutely no chance of going under anytime soon. At Dad's words, Christopher fell to his knees. I had a bad feeling, so what was all this for? Ultimately, Christopher was just caught in Lily's scheme. Lily was intrigued by Christopher, who had married the president's daughter, and approached him out of curiosity. Initially ignored, she lied to catch his attention. The company is finished. Being married to the president's daughter puts you at risk too. Apparently, this lie worked on Christopher. Fearing a joint downfall with us, Christopher probably started ignoring me, hoping for an amicable divorce. I was just deceived, Zoe, you understand, right? Christopher approached me with a strained face. Well, perhaps you were merely deceived. Yes, I was, so let's not talk about divorce. But you know, this has made things very clear to me. Christopher looked up at me, puzzled. Essentially, this man would be the first to flee if we were ever in the same predicament. And this time, he even cheated without consulting me about how business was going first. Moreover, instead of proposing divorce directly, he manipulated things so that it would seem like the suggestion came from me, which is the height of cowardice. You know the vows, in sickness and in health. You would probably abandon me without hesitation if I fell ill. No, I wouldn't do that, Zoe. Please listen. There's nothing left to discuss. I just wanted to know why you were ignoring me. All this time, I thought I had done something wrong. Let's handle the rest through our lawyers. Lawyers? Christopher's face went pale. Having an affair while married, did you think there wouldn't be any consequences? I'll make sure both you, Lily, and you, Christopher, are properly charged for the divorce proceedings. Wait. If I can't even stay at the company, how can I afford the shorty for a divorce trial? Christopher's voice trembled, and almost simultaneously, Lily also raised a panicked shout. No way, that's ridiculous. It was all just a joke, and it's his fault for falling for it. The two of them blamed each other, each insisting they were not at fault. The sight of that was so ugly it made me sick. Had I endured a month of agony for these people? How pathetic. To the arguing pair, I said with a smile. Now I understand. You two are perfect for each other. So alike. I made the right decision stepping back. Well, we won't be seeing each other again. Goodbye. Wait, Zoe! Dad put his arm around my shoulder protectively. We left them behind. Christopher kept calling my name from behind, but I ignored him thoroughly. Later, I received the surety for the divorce proceedings from both Christopher and Lily. Christopher, apparently having a decent amount of savings, paid it in one lump sum. Lily's payment came from her parents, also in a lump sum. And as for their places at the company, we'll have to fire him. I tried to calm Dad, who was furious, while pondering what to do, but eventually, the two of them couldn't stand the scrutiny and resigned on their own. I was relieved, but Dad was the one who was most relieved and happy about it. Christopher seemed to have been crying till the end because he couldn't let go of the past. If only he hadn't done what he did. Perhaps what Christopher really regretted was losing the title of being the president's son-in-law. The thought of never having to see his face again felt refreshing. Returning home as a divorcee, my family welcomed me warmly. I also returned to my job as an office clerk. I thought I might be treated delicately, but to my surprise, everyone welcomed me back warmly. Since it's over, I was always wondering why someone like you chose him. Someone said so, patting my back, which made me burst into laughter. If I ever get married again, I'll make sure to avoid someone who's only good on the outside.